We're here.
We're here.
Oh, good.
I'm glad we're here. I don't know what was going on. It takes a while sometimes.
Oh, good.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Glad to see everybody. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Get this. Get this fixed.
yeah, we need to get it fixed. And you know, part of this is that they keep coming up with new security things. So it's actually a little harder than it used to be. So anyway, glad.
So at least we won't get bombed, right?
Exactly. So nice to see everybody here.
We'll give it a few minutes before we start. Hey, Ethel, congratulations on being a grandma again.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
How's everybody doing?
of course, you don't need to be told this, but it's a really cute baby.
I saw the picture. It is a cute baby.
And you know, the funny thing is, I actually saw someone recently who posted a picture of a grandchild, and I thought, ooh, that's a really ugly baby, though. I hope it gets cuter. You know, it's like one of those things where you thought, oh, what can you say about a baby that's just, you
It's
know,
a baby.
it's a baby. It's going to get better.
Yeah. I've always kind of had that thought about sometimes, and how do you say something without saying something that can offend or whatever.
Hello?
Well, and I have to say, I always think back, I mean, which is just one of those adolescent memories, is I actually recall a childhood. I was a really awkward adolescent. I had like a decade of awkwardness. And I remember a friend of the family, an adult friend of the family, saying to me one day when I was dressed up for some occasion, she said, "Oh, you're getting to be pretty."
Well,
and I thought,
she's on.
wait a
I mean, her
minute.
name was up here. Yeah, she's at Burkley's on.
Yeah, Berkeley's
Yeah.
Berkeley's on.
Yeah.
Carol's having a problem getting on. Do you all have a suggestion?
here. No.
She might need to start again. I don't know. She and I were both out there in limbo for a long time together.
Just go back to the email and try clicking on it again.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes
Well,
if you,
I'll wing it or something.
okay.
Yeah. We'll start in a minute, another minute
Yeah.
for people to get on.
Well, Berkeley, does this feel like more complex times than it did when you started in Metro Council?
It's certainly different. There's a lot to be said for being able to, have one meeting in your living room and then the next one 2 seconds later and not have to go across town to get to it.
Yeah.
Think of how much gas we're saving.
Oh man, that is so true.
That is true. That is true. My cousin who lives in California said she's only filled up her tank once since the pandemic started.
Wow.
She said, does this give you an idea of how isolated I am? Yeah, it really does.
Okay, well, it's about two minutes after. Ethel, you want me to wait a little bit before I do the hellos, or?
I guess, do you have any other announcements? We could see if Carol comes on, and if she can't get on, she's kind of the host.
I saw her in there.
You saw her?
In here? Okay.
Oh, there she is. Okay, I see her name.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I just want to welcome everyone and thank you for continuing to be faithful viewers of our Hot Topics. We have noticed that we have many more people attending these than we really did after we moved out of Second Harvest, because we were kind of kicked out for good reasons. And so it's exciting to see faces, to see the number of people that log on. I want to remind you that our calendar on our website, which is LWVNashville.org, has upcoming events. And if you would rather not look at the newsletter that you get in your email every month, usually around the 16th or 17th of the month, you will have the voter coming in your email. You can go on to League of Women Voters Nashville.org and see the calendar. Sometimes we add things during the month before the next newsletter comes out. And while you're there, I invite you to explore the website, which is very meaty. It has a lot of good information, and you kind of have to wander around and get in rabbit holes to get it all, but it's really interesting. And for those of you who are not members, we invite you to go to the website, that's LWVNashville.org, and click join, and you can get the options there. And if you have friends that you think would be great and good members, or even ones that you want them to be great and good members, we invite you to give them that website and get them there, because we think that it's really interesting to continue to grow our membership for people from all over, and continue to grow. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carol. Are you there?
I am here.
Hi, Carol. I'm glad to see you.
Can you in fact see me?
No.
Okay. I don't know what's going on, but I'm not doing well. Okay. Except to say I'm here, I'm speaking, and you'll just have to do me without a face for a little while. I'm excited that we have Burkley speaking to us today. Burkley, for starters, is a member of the league and has been for a while, but she also has been a council person before she became council person at large. And so she has a long history of both looking at, observing, and digesting all that's going on in the metropolitan government. She has been on just about every committee they've got, from public works to planning to the convention committee to the homeless committee. And most frequently, she has been responsible for the affordable housing committee. And so she's been a really busy lady, and I'm delighted to have her, and she can tell us what's coming in the future and what we might be wary about in the future. And the other thing that I would like to say is that this is one smart lady. She has a degree in physics that just makes me go whenever I'm around her. And then she has a graduate degree in mechanical engineering. And so the lady knows how things work. Welcome, Burkley. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you.
Thank you very much, Carol. I love this group. You all are such a good wealth of information that is always objective and factual, and that means so much to me. I have pictures, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. If I'm authorized to share my screen, I will try to do that. Or if somebody can get me authorized, maybe that's you, Madeline. And if not, you can listen without seeing my fun pictures. Let's see. If the host can enable it, it'll be more interesting, but I can
see if I can, whoops. Hold on a minute. I don't know if I'm the one who's authorized. That's why I'm.
Whoever the host is, might be Madeline.
Let's see. All right. I'm sorry. I'm struggling on this a little bit. Yeah, go ahead and start, and I'll see if I can.
You poke around, and if it comes up, I'll let you know.
Oh, okay. Make co-host. Okay, I got you as co-host.
Okay, let's see if that does it.
Got it. Let's see if that works.
We'll give it a minute. It's not coming up right now, but I'll try in a second.
Okay.
But yeah, okay. Let's see if that works.
Does it matter if you're a co-host or a host?
I think this is going to do it. Yes, here we are. How about that?
Great.
All right, there's my picture.
Perfect.
So Carol asked me if I would talk about the state of Music City. So I looked at the write-up and figured I would follow that like a good engineer, make sure I know what the scope of work is, and then execute it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the big things that have defined us for the past year, working backwards from where we are now, from COVID to the downtown bombing to the tornado/derecho, and then our tumultuous budget last year, which is now our tumultuous budget this year. And then from there, kind of circle around to where I think all those things lead us in the future, which I think is good. I just want to start with that. I think Nashville has shown amazing resilience, and people have done a fantastic job of supporting each other. And it is certainly a time of hardship for everybody, but I hope we will continue to be a city known for its volunteerism and support for other people. So let's start with COVID. If I can make this little thing disappear. So engineer that I am, when the COVID pandemic started, I thought I just need to get my arms around this. So I started a chart, and it has now given me the ability to have all kinds of nifty graphics that I can look at. So you can, as we all know, see where COVID has been. It started off slow, and then we had the big jump in the summer from people not necessarily taking seriously the needs to keep our distance from each other and to wear masks and other things that that we were just learning were necessary. But once we had the big shutdown and realized that it made a difference to not be exposing ourselves to each other, then you can see that things flatten back off again until it looks like around Thanksgiving and Christmas, we had the huge jump, and we are just at the tail end of that now, where the number of total infections is not increasing as quickly as it was. And that's good news. You can see the same story here told in the number of daily cases, which peaked in July after the July 4 weekend, possibly. And then we had the Thanksgiving, where we had over 1,000 cases in one day, which is astounding. So I think it was times like that got us to the point where everyone now knows someone who's had COVID, and unfortunately, probably most of us have lost someone to that, which is tragic. And so I think that's gotten people's attention, and now we are doing a much better job of adhering to the advice that we've been given from our health providers for a long time. So it's encouraging that the trend is downward. One last chart. This is the number of fatalities, which, if I could make that thing move out of the way, maybe y'all don't see it. There we go. You can see we are quickly approaching 600 deaths in Nashville, which is so unfortunate. But we are learning with each passing day how to take better care of people that get it, and we are getting in a better position of people not getting it, which is where we need to be. So let's talk a little bit about the economic impact of that. I think everyone would agree that the initial total shutdown in April was absolutely necessary, because we had no idea what we were dealing with, and we just needed the opportunity to find out what was going to make a difference before we started allowing people to have mass spreader events, which we saw enough of in other places that I think we didn't want to necessarily go there. But the unfortunate downside of that shutdown was a huge increase in unemployment. And even as businesses slowly have been able to come back, our hospitality industry, which in Nashville is a big part of our economy, is still way down, simply because people have now, realized that traveling to other places is not a good idea. So even if the city health department said, heck yeah, go back and open everything up again, we would still have a lag there, just because the tourists aren't going to come until we all know that we're safe again. And I think that's coming later in the year, and we will see a recovery. But in the meantime, there was a huge amount of need. And thankfully, the federal government was jumped right on allocating funding for every state. And then that was passed from the states to the cities, and Nashville got $121 million. And we immediately set up a committee, which had 3 council members on it. Sandra Sepulveda, Courtney Johnston, and Jennifer Gamble did, I think, an excellent job of working with that committee and then communicating with the council on what decisions had been made. And then we okayed every decision, so that all the money, it was allocated in an open and transparent, and I think very fair way. The first thing the city had to do was set up assessment centers so that we would know who had COVID and who didn't. At that point, we were still trying to contain the spread through contact tracing, and that's a key piece of it. And also knowing whether you need to, head for the hospital or just go home and stay in bed. Being tested is an important piece of that. So of that 121 million, we have used 69 million for the testing centers, which have been opened now for 9 months longer, and also running the shelter at the fairgrounds, so that people experiencing homelessness wouldn't have to be crowded in to the existing shelters that we have, the Salvation Army and the room in the inn. When you add a 6-foot distancing requirement, then their capacity goes way down. So we created additional capacity in a safe, very spread out way, and that facility has been, has been used and utilized every night since it was opened, and has required, staffing and food and some medical attention there as well. The next biggest allocation was to Metro Schools. That 24 million went to buy laptops and hotspots and technical support to every student, so that we, decided in May, I've lost track now, that, in-person learning was going to have to be suspended for a while. It was right after spring break. So we told students, stay home. We're going to get everybody a laptop, and we're going to do this virtually. And in an astounding feat, that 24 million was added to all the laptops that were sitting on carts in schools were handed out. And we discovered that all those laptops didn't have cables, so we got cables. And in short order, every family that didn't have some kind of laptop had a Metro laptop. And then we began to fill in the others. And ultimately now we've also gotten devices to teachers, so that there's standardization there as well. So that's been a huge effort. And every teacher is a hero that has learned how to, excuse me? Okay. Every teacher is a hero that has learned how to teach a bunch of kids sitting around computers and keep them engaged. And I have had the good fortune to sit in virtually on a couple of classes, and it's amazing what they do. And another huge need that was clearly identified was the rent assistance to keep people who were no longer receiving income, especially service workers and people related to the hospitality industry, to enable them to continue to pay rent, which is good both for the person in the house and for the landlord. And also, it became clear that schools were the main source of food for many children. So we began a process of delivering food, often with the school buses that were no longer taking kids to school. And that took $19 million. And then finally, $9 million went to small business support. That was through different agencies. United Way and Pathway Lending were already set up so that they were quickly able to pivot and begin to take applications and qualify people and get the funds to them so that they could continue to keep some of their business going, or to pay whatever employees weren't being covered by federal money. So we will find out, how many of our small and local businesses will survive this, but those that do, it will be because the city has been able to allocate that funding. So we're grateful that it came down from the federal government, that we've been able to pass it on through, and hopeful that Congress will continue to provide some, at least for the next couple of months before the economy is back on track for that. And I think everyone's aware, that there was federal and state money through the Payroll Protection Program and unemployment payments, and HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Agency, provided $8 million in emergency solutions grants, which have been really effectively used to get people back into housing. So that's a program that has taken, at this point, 400 people off the streets and gotten them into supported housing, which has a good chance of transitioning into permanent housing. And that's an important thing. And then also, I think an important thing that Metro did was that we kept going. I think there are some business people who say, well, I had to send all my people home and stop paying them. Why didn't Metro just quit paying people? And the answer to that is because Metro was still providing services on every front. Libraries closed down, but we were still doing curbside curbside delivery of books, and the parks closed down, but we were still doing virtual programming. And certainly Metro Services was doing double duty above and beyond what they had been doing. And trash still needs to be picked up and fires still need to be put out. So the city government continued running, although when we get to the budget, I will talk more about reducing our employee numbers simply through attrition, just because we've been asking every department to save money for the past couple of years. So staffing has been reduced and we have saved money in that way, but we have continued to provide services to everyone in Metro, which I think is important. So that's a picture of where the vaccine is and what it has done economically and how we've tried to provide support through this time. And the good news is that now the vaccine has arrived, and I'm guessing everybody has already seen this chart that shows what the phases are. The state government has set up this priority chart, and we cannot mess with it very much. If our health department calls and says, we want to jump group 2A up ahead, the state will say, well, then we're just not going to send you your vaccines this week. So we are pretty much held to this schedule, and we have pretty much gotten through the 1A1, which is the inpatient service providers, the frontline healthcare workers, residents and staff of long-term care facilities. And now we're in 1A2, which is outpatient healthcare, and also anyone who's working directly with direct patient exposure. And on top of that, we're now layering age group categories. Currently, we are allowing people 75 and older to sign up for vaccines and go to the Music City Center. I've been told that it's a very efficient setup, and that they have golf carts to get you there, that parking is free, and everyone that has been through the process has been really impressed with it. The process has worked really well. The one shortcoming is that every vaccine that comes in is being used. And if we got 4 times as many, we could probably get that many out there. So as vaccine production ramps up, then we hope this whole process will speed up. So it will probably be a while before we get to phase 1C, probably in March, and it will be probably end of summer and into fall before we've gotten to the point where we've reached herd immunity, which is the all-time goal. So that's COVID and where we are. And because we have gotten this under control, the schools announced on Monday that they will be rephasing back in the buildings to teach on this schedule that's shown here, starting with the pre-K through 4th graders next Tuesday, and then eventually getting the 10th through 11th and 12th graders back in the building for the first time this year, which I think everybody who has signed up to do that will be glad to be there. There are some families who have chosen to continue to stay virtual, and that will still be provided to them. So there are an awful lot of families that have been pushing to be back in the building. So hopefully we can keep the transmission of the virus low. Let's all do our part. And the students can stay in the schools. Okay, that's COVID. So working our way backwards to the other things that have made this year crazy. And to give you an update on where we are, Christmas Day, we woke up to the unbelievable news that our downtown business area had an explosion that turned out to be a bomb. And at that point, then there were large areas of 2nd Avenue from Broadway all the way to Union that were shut down because it was a crime scene and the FBI was on site. It has since become a much smaller area. You can see here the green is open to car traffic now. The red is pedestrian traffic only, and the little green arrow, I think I can, that little green arrow next to the river is pedestrian only in that part. And then the hashed area is open only to people that have an escort. And these 3 buildings, that's 170 through 176 2nd Avenue South, have been determined to be unsafe structurally. So those are the only ones right now that have no access to them. The rest of them, as soon as the building owner, structural engineer, has said the building is okay, Metro is doing an inspection, the fire marshal does an inspection, Codes does an inspection, and then they're good to go to open their businesses back up again. So we are close to having everything except the area between Commerce and Church back up and running soon, which is amazing. A lot of windows had to be replaced and a lot of glass cleaned up, but hopefully most of that area will be back in place soon. The rest of the areas are those three areas. It probably is going to be a year before we get back in them, and that recovery is being led by Ron Gobbles, who is an architect who's done a number of great projects in Nashville. Did the ballpark, is working on visioning how we rebuild the historic part in a historic way that respects what's there, and maybe even makes it better. Maybe we pay more attention to the riverfront on the backside. So in mid-February, Ron and Metro Planning will be holding a number of charrettes open to the public to come talk about what their vision is for that part of Second Avenue, and how we can make it even better than it was before it suffered this unbelievable damage. So if there are people who are interested in helping, show up to the charrette and log your opinion there. And also a number of funds have been set up that people can contribute to. The Metro Historic Commission Foundation has set up one, NashvilleMHCF.org. And then there are a lot of little individual GoFundMe accounts for each specific business. And you can go to the districtnashville.org and access any of those. If you, like me, want to help the melting pot to come back, and if you want to help them pay a couple of employees to keep them online, then there are ways to do that. And Hands on Nashville, as always, is also another way to be part of that. Okay, then moving farther back, this year was unbelievable. So in the summer, in response to the killing of George Floyd, we had nationwide protest. And in Nashville, as in many places, although most of the people who showed up had totally peaceful intentions, a few bad actors caused things to get out of hand. And we had, one evening of rioting where a lot of storefronts in downtown Nashville were damaged, as well as major damage to the courthouse. Which again, we sort of feel like that kind of thing can't happen here until it does. And amazingly enough, it's all happened in the same year. And in response to that, Nashville has worked very hard to look carefully at our policing policy. And part of that was hiring a new police chief, and Chief John Drake has come in and hit the ground running. The mayor also formed a policing policy commission that came up with a number of recommendations for how Nashville can move its policing policy from what has been a reactive and over-policed type of policy to a more proactive and community-based. And Chief Drake has embraced that. He has already met multiple times with the Community Oversight Board and agreed to work with them. And I think that relationship will be very productive, and I'm grateful that he's done that. And he has also worked very deliberately on increasing diversity within the police force, both through his recruitment efforts and also at the top through promotions in leadership positions. He's already moved a number of women and African-American officers up to leadership positions. So he's walking the walk. And in addition to major changes at the police department, Metro has also worked on applying an equity lens to all our departments to say, whenever we do a project, are we taking one more step just to think through how does this work with minority communities or with our immigrant community? And by taking that extra step or having someone look at it from a different perspective, sometimes we're realizing that changes need to be made in order to be more equitable in our approach. One specific example is our procurement department. We've had a number of different procurement studies to sort of check on how we're doing in terms of hiring minority and women-owned businesses. And each report has shown very modest improvement. And the final one said, we have now documented that Metro has these goals in place and Metro is not meeting them. If you will excuse me, I have a dryer that I have to let the repairman in for. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
So while she's gone, I think you can, if you want to put questions or comments in the chat, then either Ethel or Carol can monitor those after Burkley finishes your presentation.
My apologies. I was afraid that was going to happen during this. So procurement now has not only goals, but we also have metrics to measure if we have met those goals. And if we don't meet them, then we will, then we've got enough of a review that we will realize that and work on outreach programs and capacity building. Okay, and final one, way back in March, almost a year from now, we all remember the tornado, which at the time seemed like the most devastating thing imaginable. And this is a classic picture of the basement and the I Believe in Nashville sign that survived. And I think that's the story of everything we've done. And, you know, as in everything else, nonprofit organizations jumped in, the Equity Alliance, churches just rushed in and started helping set up food distribution and clothes and places for people to be. There are mortgage programs that will help people pay their mortgage while they're rebuilding. And this has been sort of quietly happening in the background, but there's still devastation from this that will continue. We did get federal disaster money from that is being allocated. But the whole volunteer effort was certainly complicated by the need to have social distancing. So that issue has gone on quietly. So I want to go from there to talking a little bit about our budget. I will take a breath for just a second and just ask if anybody has questions or comments before I blaze right into the talking about the budget. I see a few things in the chat, so let me check that. Why are Davidson County residents having to go to other counties to get the COVID vaccine? This is a great question. So Davidson County has a disproportionate number of healthcare workers because we're a healthcare center. And so for us to work through our 1A1 category, there are just more people that are getting that shot before we get to the 75 and older and the other categories. So every shot that is being delivered to Nashville is going into an arm. And if you actually look at our numbers, we have delivered more vaccinations than anyone else around us. But we just have more healthcare workers. So as we get through that group and then move into the next one, then finally we will be into the teacher age group. I mean, the teacher category and probably the 70 and older age group. And because the number of vaccines that are sent to each county are based on the numbers that we've sent to them, it has the potential to mess things up if a whole lot of us go to another county and take their vaccines. But our health department is not prohibiting that. You know, if somebody shows up and they're the right age or the right category, they're getting a vaccine because we just want to vaccinate everyone. So, you know, if you're not threatened and you can wait your turn, that's probably best. If you just feel really strongly about it, go for it. Nobody's gonna catch you at the county line and send you back. So I think that's a great question. Let's see, Susie Wilcox asked, are the goals available for public reading? And I have talked so fast that I can't remember what context that goes to. So Susie, if you'll unmute and expound on that question, I'll try to answer it.
I think those were the procurement goals. That's what you were talking about.
Excellent. And I'll have to say the report was something that I was really up on a while back, and I'm not as up on it. But it was, what percentage of minority or disadvantaged or women-owned businesses have bid on this job? How many got it? And at the end, how many actually got paid? One more time for the dryer. Excuse me. Yes, sir. Uh-huh. Ooh. Okay. Do it. Okay. Great.
And then if you want to start it, I said you have to do it. If you open the door, turn the timer to whatever time
Okay, we'll try it. Thank you. I appreciate that. So sorry. All right, we're getting the dryer fixed. So in the past, we've just said, oh, heck, we missed the goal. Now we have put in place, if we miss the goal, then we've got to have these outreach programs, or we've got to build this capacity, or the Nashville Entrepreneur Center needs to be contacting these people and building this up. And we're going to work to make sure that we have these names on our list, and that if they're not contacting us, we'll contact them. That'll be reviewed again, and we'll see if we're doing better. And I will say we have a number of council members who watch this very closely. So I think we're going to continue to make progress on that. And it's important because it's just a great way to build capacity and spread economic opportunity to every community. And that's going to make Nashville a better place. So thank you for that question. Well, with that, I'm going to jump into the budget because I think that's a hot topic. And I'm going to share my screen again. Ooh, it worked. This is amazing. So, or maybe not. Let's try this. Okay, there we go. All right, so the Metro budget process begins in January of every year and runs all the way through July. At this point, all the departments are telling the mayor what they would like to operate. They've been told to keep it slim. It's another tough year. And last year, we were in the same position. So just in general, to tell you how the budget works. We have two parts. We have the operating budget and the capital budget. I'm going to talk about the operating budget right now. So this year's budget was a $2.47 billion budget. And as you can see right here, the revenues, by far the biggest chunk of that comes from property taxes. And next is local option sales taxes. Actually, this year, next is grants and contributions, and then local option sales taxes. And that's unusual, and that's a function of
Burkley,
yes.
we are not seeing your screen.
Oh, that's a shame because it's such a great picture. All right, let me work back to share screen. Let's see if that does it. Are you seeing that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for pointing that out. All right, let's make it look big. There we go. So now you can see property taxes is 59% and grants and contributions is 17%, local option sales tax is 14%. So we began this year already thinking that it was going to be a tight year, and then COVID hit. And we knew sales tax was going to be smaller. So this is larger than it typically is. And then grants and contributions is often somewhere on this order. Every department depends on getting federal grants or state grants, and that is always a part of our budget. And they work very proactively to apply for those at every single council meeting. Part of what we begin with through our resolutions is either accepting grants or accepting applications to fund one program or another for each department. So it's an important part of our the income on our budget. So this is the revenue on our budget, and this is the spending part of it. And again, what's key is that 37% of our budget is education. And that is unfortunately a lower number than it used to be. It used to be close enough to 50% that you could round up and say half our budget was for education. And I believe that's as it should be. And it's a goal for us to strive for. So that's a key goal right there. The next biggest portion is public safety, which is 20%. And that's police, fire, and emergency, Office of Emergency Management and ambulances. And that's, that one held steady this year. Nobody got any raises, and that includes public safety. And then what is noteworthy is the third biggest chunk is debt service. And debt service is simply our payment on our mortgage for the things that we've built. And in essence, Nashville gets a different mortgage every year for the projects that we want to build. And I'll talk about the capital budget in just a minute. But for every year, there is a series of different debt obligations that we have to pay for different bond issues that we've had. And that 14% is the highest number that I've seen since I've been on the council. I mean, interestingly, there are people who say, well, we should put a cap on that, say it can't go any higher. And the bond rating services get more unhappy about that than they do about it being at that height. As long as they know that we can raise money to do what we want to do, the bond rating agencies believe in, they can look at our economy and our diversity and our history. And we've got a good bond rating. And we were able just to refinance a bunch of debt and save $60 million over 10 years because we were able to get a lower interest rate because we had a good bond rating. Our finance director tried to do that back in the fall. And because of the referendum that was hanging over us, the bond rating agencies were looking at us very dubiously, and the interest rate was not good. And so once we got that referendum behind us and the threat of not being able to set taxes where they need to be to provide services, then the bond rating agencies gave us a good rating again, and we were able to save money. So that's an important take home right there is we can spend less on our debt if we are good stewards and we have good policy. And we our policy is I think improving yearly as it gets more and more scrutiny. And I'll come back to that in just a second. So that's essentially where most of our spending goes. And then we do have a few other departments like the water department that's an enterprise fund. They raise their own money through water rates and spend it on providing water and paying their employees. So they don't really fit in this pie chart here, although they do have to come to council and let us know what they're doing. And also we have to authorize increases in rates for the water department. And you may remember we just did that as well. So it's been a year of economic reckoning simply because we have kicked the can down the road for a number of reasons. And I want to tell you about those reasons. So it is traditional to have a tax increase after a reappraisal. The state law requires that we reappraise all the property every 4 years, and they also require that it be a revenue neutral process. And that means if we say that all the property in Davidson County is worth $1 billion, and then we spend, the 6 months going around looking at each piece of property and doing comparables of what things have sold and reevaluate what the worth of all that based on the real estate information that is available. If it went up to 1.4 billion, and that's about the increase that we had at the last reappraisal, 37% on average, then the tax rate has to go down by that proportionate amount so that as a city, we're getting the same income. The state will not let us reap a windfall from our reappraisal. And so what that means is the property values have risen. They reflect inflation and the increase in cost of things. But we can't make our cost of living adjustment through that process. And so typically what we've done is we've said, okay, we're going to lower the property tax rate. That's how much you pay per $100 of assessed value to keep it revenue neutral. And then we'll look at what we need over the course of the next 4 years to get the income to do the important things that we want to do. And we'll adjust our property tax accordingly. And that's the way it has worked pretty much over the history of Metro, if you go all the way back to 1963. However, we skipped that process twice in the past couple of decades, and for good reasons, but it put us in a hard place. So in 2009, we skipped that because we were in the middle of a recession, and at the time, it seemed more important to help people make it through the recession than to do a catch up on Metro income, and that makes sense. But it sounds familiar, and here we are again. So in 2013, different year, we had a reappraisal, and we had economic times were good, and people were prospering, and we were able to, in a very logical and proactive way, go out to the people and say, you know, here's what your government does for you. We pick up your trash. We pave your streets. We provide you with clean water. We pick up your brush. We have libraries. We have parks. They're open. The community centers are open on the weekends, and the libraries can be open on the weekends. And if you value that, we need a tax increase. If you're willing to go back to 3 brush pickups a year and closing the libraries on Friday, then we'll keep taxes the same. And through that process, people said, you know, we think those services are worth paying for. So that was a time when we did adjust the taxes. 2017, you may remember, that was when the 37% increase in property values happened. And we were also in the middle of a transit referendum, asking people to create a dedicated source of funding for transit, which we need, through a sales tax increase. And so we didn't ask for a property tax increase that year. And that failed resoundingly, unfortunately. And then we had the turmoil of changes of mayors repeatedly. And so in every year that came up, someone was in a position where it just wasn't the right time to talk about increasing revenue for Metro. So all that is to say, we ended up in 2019, beginning our budget year with the state comptroller coming to us and saying, you've kicked the can down the road far enough. Your fund balances are very low, and you're balancing your budget by selling assets like land or like a parking deal or like your downtown energy system. And so our current mayor, Mayor Cooper, said, well, I think we shouldn't sell those assets, and we're just going to have some fiscal discipline and balance this budget. And so Director Crumbo, who has a history of getting out of difficult financial situations. He's the person who helped orchestrate the symphony rebound. Came and looked at the Metro budget and said, here are things we need to do. We're going to tell departments they can't hire anybody. We're going to make these changes, and we're going to get back in order, and we're going to get the comptroller off of our back. And he did that very successfully. And then in March, all the plans that were being made for this coming year's budget had to be adjusted because of COVID. And that's where this big piece of the pie on the property taxes comes from, because that local option sales tax, we expected to drop by, at that point, we said 25%, thinking this whole thing would last 3 months. And now it's lasted a year. So we have had to adjust downward on the sales tax income and try to cut spending as much as we could. But again, I'll go back to schools. There's a state mandate that you have to, it's called maintenance of effort. You have to keep paying schools what you paid them the previous year, and public safety is pretty hard to downsize on as well. So, and debt service, you can't downsize on. So then you end up with not much of the pie that you can do reductions in. So that's how we got to a $1.06 per $100 of assessed value property tax increase last year. And the good news is, if we look at what we've done now, the state comptroller has come back and said to us, you are on track. You're doing the right things. I'm not going to threaten to taking you over anymore. And if we continue on that track, then we should be good to go. So we now have what he considers a structurally balanced budget. Revenues are being paid for by recurring sources of income. And we now have a cash reserve back at 5% like we're supposed to. And this is another reappraisal year. So in April, new appraisal values will come out for all properties, and we will adjust our tax rate, I think, downward again. I mean, despite the economic hardship of the COVID, construction has continued, house building has continued, and prices have continued to go up. So, except for the big hole downtown, it is likely that our tax base will have increased, and therefore, in theory, our tax rate will go down. And then I can't say how we will adjust on that. But I can say that when we made the increase last year, the goal was to do that and not have to put that on people again. At the time, we didn't know what we were dealing with in terms of COVID. So I'm going to get back to seeing if there are questions again. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There we go. See if there are questions. So that's how we got to where we were. I mean, some people ask, why in the world are we in this problem when we are such a booming city? And yes, we are booming, and there is a lot of great economic activity. But for a number of different reasons, we have not been able to give ourselves a cost of living increase that we need. And we did. It had to be a big one. And unfortunately, it had to be a big one in a bad year. But I believe it was big enough that it should carry us for a couple of years. I'm not promising that, so don't quote me. But it was a forward-looking adjustment. So I think that we tried hard not to go through this pain repeatedly. So having said that, let me go back to, how does our percent towards debt service compare to similar cities? We are on the high end right now. And in some circles, even the bond rating agencies will say, well, you're growing and, there's all kinds of infrastructure you need to build, and it's appropriate for you to be spending this money now, and the growth will catch up. There are other philosophies that say, no, you need to get a handle on this. So this is the first year where we had no capital spending plan. The other piece of the budget is anything that costs more than $50,000 or will last longer than 10 years, you pull out and have a separate capital budget. And then that gets funded through bond issues. And those bond issues are just like, getting a mortgage. You say, I'm going to pay this off over the 30 years, and that. We just happen to have this cascade of different years that all add up. But when you do it right, there's always one year that's going away that you just finished up. And so that payment's gone now. So we've got a little bit of room for a new payment. In 2009, again, because we were dealing with the recession, there was a refinancing of our debt that lowered interest rates, and that was good, but it also pushed some payments out to 2023. So we have this bump in our debt service payment that doesn't give us the drop off every year that's supposed to give us room to build more. So if we're going to be disciplined about this, I think we have to continue to build sidewalks and pave roads and things like that. And, somebody's going to need a new school. We can't just say we're not going to do anything. But I think this year we said we're not going to think of any new projects and authorize them. The new capital spending plan is coming out today, and I'm not sure what the total is, but I did get excited about what they're doing for sidewalks and bikeways. And we all have things we care about, and we all would love, the library in Donaldson. But all of those things add up. So we will need to be disciplined this year and say we're going to spend what will fit into something that keeps our debt service reasonable, which I think is 14% or lower. So good question. Kitty says, is the referendum and or other threat to the property tax increase definitely behind us? I think it's more behind us now because the last election now was a presidential election, and a huge number of people voted in that one. More, it was a record. And the way referendums work is you have to get a certain percentage of the number of people who voted in the last election. So that the first referendum was easy because they were following a local, I guess they were following the May primaries. And there was a very low threshold at that time. It will be a much, much higher threshold in the next year. When we have another election, that'll reset. But I think by then people will have, come to realize that there's value in the city providing services, and we really are working hard at being fiscally responsible. And we'll continue to try to show them that. Let's see. Okay. And then Anne asked, how is Music City Solar doing financially? Its ridership until COVID is growing annually. I mean, it is officially known as the most economic commuter rail in the country. because we got to use a rail that was already there, and we bought used cars from Chicago. So we were able to get into it on the low end of things. And I will have to do some research before I say for sure that it's breaking even. But I know that every year it has more riders on it and more people who are enthusiastic about spreading the word on it. So that's not a total answer, but let me try to find out and get back to you on that one. I think it's a good question. I think I have a few more minutes, and there's lots more I could talk about, but I wanted to drop in and see questions. But are there other questions to put in the chat, or for people just to shout out and ask? Or shall I talk a little bit about our transportation plan? Okay. Because I do want to just let a little bit of information about that. So one of Mayor Cooper's campaign pledges was to come up with an honest to goodness transportation plan. And that was recently completed and published just at the end of last year. And that was the result of a series of listening sessions all around Nashville. They began in person, and probably many of you have met Fada Massimo, who we stole from Atlanta, and she is a transportation whiz. And she showed up, instead of saying, here's what we're going to do, she said, here are things that different cities do for transportation, and I'm giving each of you $20 in Monopoly money. And you go spend it over there, in these buckets on what you want. And so you could put all $20 on sidewalks and bikeways if you wanted to, or you could put all $20 on light rail. And so she used that as a way to gauge what the appetite in Nashville was for transit. And what came back was, number one, keep the roads that we have in good repair, and optimize the signals so that they work better, and make our bus services work better. Thank you, Linda. You agree? Let's have the buses run longer and more frequently, and and go to more places, and put crosstown buses in, and let's have Wi-Fi on the buses, and good bus stops and good sidewalks to the buses. So we've come up with what's called a $1.6 billion transportation plan. But the strategy this go round is very different, which is we're going to have this plan in place, and particularly with the new administration, who we think is actually going to allocate money for infrastructure jobs. They'll come say, here's this project. Do you have a plan? And now we have a plan. And so as we apply for the different grants that are out there, we'll leverage what funding we have with hopefully meaningful amounts of federal and state money to make those things happen. So the goal is for that $1.6 billion project to happen over a number of years, and for every dollar in there to be leveraged many times with money from outside sources. And, ultimately, we may eventually go back to trying to find a dedicated source of funding for transportation so we can truly do commuter rail or something like that. But that's not the immediate need right now. The bus rapid transit routes on Murfreesboro Road and Clarksville Pike get to the two places where we have the most commuters coming from. And, if we can make them frequent enough and useful enough and get some people off the road, then maybe that will decrease the awful traffic on the roads that get us between here and there. So that is a document that you can find on the Metro website. If you just Google Metro Transportation Plan, you should be able to see that. And two other important things in there are traffic calming, which every neighborhood swears that their street is the worst cut through in all of Nashville. And it is aggravating when it's your street, and you just want to be able to stand out and chat with your neighbors, in the middle of the street. So that program has gotten applications from every single district, and multiple requests for that, and they are processing them on a priority based on where does the data show the problems really are worse. But that's a very important program. And then also Vision Zero, which is a national name for trying to reduce the number of pedestrian deaths to zero. And sadly, in Nashville, our number has gone up every single year. And this year, last Saturday, we just had the memorial service for 39 pedestrians who were killed on Nashville streets, which is inexcusable. And it's very easy to see. I'm almost done. Where those accidents happen. If you map them out, they line up on the major corridors. They happen at big intersections, or near bus stops that don't have an easy way to get to the other side of the street. And those of us who ride the bus know that, you got to hit it from both sides of the street coming and going. So there is money in there to improve those intersections, to put signalized crosswalks, and to add better lighting and things like that to hopefully make that work better. And then the one really sexy one is the Jefferson Street connector, which would begin to repair, one of the many wrongs in our African-American neighborhood, where we cut Jefferson Street in half in several places. This one looks at where the interstate goes under it, so that we could actually cap the interstate and create connectivity from one side of Jefferson near 10th and 12th and 11th over there. So that the businesses flow from one side to the other without that big barrier of the interstate there. So that is kind of the one thing that I think has real, it just is, in addition to being a fantastic project, it's glitzy and fun and all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure where in the list it will happen. But I think it's symbolically, it's as important as the 28th, 31st Avenue connector was. So I do hope that we see it happen at some point. Let's see, long-term water plans for bringing water, sewer, and sanitary sewer up to date. That is a great question. I mentioned earlier that the water department is its own enterprise fund, and for very similar reasons to where the Metro budget was, they put off a much needed increase in water rates until we got to the point that it had to be a big increase. And anybody that has a sprinkler system called me this July and let me know that they thought it was too big. But if you're just, washing your clothes and fixing food, it may be added, $8 a month. But for some people, it was a $500 a month jump. And that is an invitation to learn to conserve water. So we have done that. But that rate was derived by an out-of-town consultant who did a study that said, this is what it costs you to provide clean water and to take dirty water back to all the citizens. And here's how you spread that cost out over all your customers so that you actually have enough money to keep up with what your needs are. So we have, with that water rate now, given ourselves the funding we need to update a lot of really old, we still have some wooden pipes in the ground and some brick ones, from the 1800s. And usually in cold weather like this is when they fail on us. And it's more expensive to fix something in an emergency than to just march through in an organized fashion. So I can't give you a timeline on, how quickly that will happen, but everything has been identified and put into a schedule, of here's what we need to do next. And now we are creating the funding we need to do that. So, yes.
We are running out of time.
Okay. I think that's all the questions that I see. So I'm just waiting for y'all to shut me down.
And I'm sorry. I'm sorry we don't have a bit more time, because I'm sure that as people have listened to you, they've got a multitude of questions to ask. Perhaps we can re-engage you at a later point just to say, answer all these questions for us. Burkley, thank you so very much.
My pleasure.
Being a part of this and for sharing with us all the knowledge that you have. And I think we all have learned something about process and answered questions that I had wondered about. And I'm all the time asking people questions. So you answered something nobody ever answered quite as well. So thank you very, very much.
My pleasure.
You do a great job of explaining things to us.
Thank you. Email me anytime. It's just my name at nashville.gov. Thank you. I appreciate being part of it.
Hey, I have one last comment, and then I'm ready to bring this meeting to an end if Madeline doesn't have anything else to say. Our next First Friday meeting will be in March, and we're going to have retired Davidson County Chancellor Claudia Bonneman as our speaker, and I asked Claudia to kind of give me some bullet points about what she was going to cover, and she gave me the most interesting list, and so I just have to quickly share it with you. She said, judges are not umpires. Don't try this at home. Judges are capable of hatred too. The room where it happened is not necessarily the courtroom.
Wow.
So with those teasers, I hope you will all come and join us at our next meeting, the first Friday in March. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank y'all. Bye all.
Burkley, thanks.
Oh, that was